Slow starts continue to hurt Syracuse basketball, and this roster just does not fit together at all.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And we're talking about Syracuse basketball and their loss at Stanford last night, 70-61. Here on One More Thing, the slow starts continue for the Orange. Plus, we're going to break down the talent on the roster, and let's all be honest, they just do not fit together, and there is a three-pronged problem that we're going to go over later here on this mini podcast. So Syracuse basketball last night against Stanford, they lost this game in the first 10 minutes. And Adrian Autry actually said that to lead off his post-game press conference. They fell behind 25-2 in the first 10 minutes of this game. That's a 23-point deficit. That's hard to do in the first 10 minutes. That's really, really hard to do. And credit to Syracuse for fighting back. Credit to Adrian Autry for getting his team refocused and playing better for the final 30 minutes of the game. But the reason why they lost is because they got off to such a bad start, and the Orange continue to put themselves in a big hole early in games. And the numbers back up what I just told you. So I went back after the game, actually it was this morning, and I looked up how many times Syracuse basketball has fallen behind by 10 or more points in the first half this season. And I went game by game, and the conclusion is in 9 of 21 games, the Orange have fallen behind by 10 or more points in the first half. You got Texas, Cornell, at Tennessee, Maryland, Wake Forest, Louisville, Notre Dame, at Clemson, and last night at Stanford. Their record in those games is 2-7. One of those wins came against Cornell. So that's a mid-major comeback double-digit win that you had right there. And the other one was Notre Dame just about 2 weeks ago. So that's it. They're 2-7. In 6 of those 9 games, the Orange have fallen behind by 10 or more points in the first 10 minutes of a game. So they're just not getting off to good starts. They really aren't. And they've tried different lineup combinations. They've had some players healthy, some players not healthy. But the problem still remains this season. When almost half the time your team is in a double-digit deficit at one point in the first half, it's hard to win games. That's how it goes. And I also wanted to look up, is this just a 2025 thing? And the answer is kind of. It kind of is more of a problem this season than it was in last season with Adrian Autry. Because last year, Syracuse basketball fell behind by 10 or more points in the first half of a game just 9 times, which equals the amount already this season, and there's still a whole month of basketball to go. So they were clearly not as bad last season in terms of starting on time than they are this season. So what's the diagnosis? What is the problem? They've tried basically everything with their starting lineup, and it has not worked. And the conclusion I came up with is this year's team, it just does not have the same chemistry that it had last year. And I think that's pretty obvious to anyone who has watched the Syracuse basketball team this season and last season. And we'll break down the talent in the next segment. But to me, it really is more on chemistry. That's it. And Adrian Autry constructed this roster. So it's not just the players. It's also on him for constructing this roster. So coming up, we'll talk about the talent on this team and the real problem behind Syracuse basketball. That's coming up next here on Locked On Syracuse. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. And I remember the thrill of seeing the New York Jets win a playoff game. That was a very long time ago, but it's a memory I will never forget. And this year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Game Time Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my seat before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer, no surprise fees at checkout, plus knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I'm Jackson Holzer, and this is Locked On Syracuse, and thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We just talked about the slow starts this season for Syracuse basketball compared to last season, and the conclusion was that I think it's more of a team chemistry problem, less so than a talent problem, because right now on this segment, we are going to talk about the talent of Syracuse basketball, okay? So this is strictly about players. Does Syracuse basketball have an ultra-talented team? No. Are they a team that's capable of going to the Final Four? No. They are not a Final Four caliber team. They are not a Sweet 16 caliber team, unless, of course, they were able to get in the tournament and get hot for a couple of games. But in terms of actual ability, no. They're not even a top 25 most talented team. And you can keep going from there. However, when you look at this year's roster, there is no reason why this team should be this bad, except, of course, for team chemistry, which we're going to get to. But in terms of pure talent on the roster, they should not be 9-12 overall and 3-7 in the ACC, in danger of missing the conference tournament. Of the scholarship players on the roster, the scholarship guys, only 2 players were not either a 4-star or 5-star high school recruit or college basketball transfer. The 2 exceptions are Naheem McLeod, who has barely played this season, and Peter Masterovich, who is a true freshman this season. That's it. Every other player that's under scholarship, you can go look up their ratings. They were either a 4 or 5-star high school recruit or a 4 or 5-star transfer. I know it might sound hard to believe, but it is true. And so now you might fire back at me saying, well, it's the star ratings. The scouts can be wrong. Yes, you are correct. Scouts can be wrong, but they are generally more right than they are wrong. I'm not going to sit here and try to argue with you that the star ratings mean everything. They clearly do not. But they do mean something. They absolutely mean something, because if we want to test the theory, let's trot out a whole roster of 3 stars, 2 stars, and no stars, and let's find out how Syracuse basketball would do next season. We can find out. And we know that team would not be very good, right? So what's the issue? To me, this roster, and it boils down really to team chemistry and team fit, it doesn't fit. The issue is threefold. Let me explain, all right? Number 1, Syracuse basketball is misevaluating talent. What does this mean? It simply means they are overestimating a player's ability. So that's one part of the problem. Number 2, they're not developing the talent that they do get. This means that they identify someone who's actually a talented player, but for one reason or another, they just don't develop. Number 3, they're not taking the right talent, meaning this player is talented, this player has developed, but they don't exactly fit the team. And if you look at Syracuse basketball's roster and you look at these players in the rotation, almost all of them you can group into one of those 3 categories. Almost all of them. I can come up with an example for each category. Let's start off with number 1, misevaluating talent. I think a big example here is Jaquan Carlos, who ironically I said should be in the starting lineup, but that is because they overestimated his ability. And so they tried to get Dakota LeFew to make Jaquan Carlos a backup point guard, but when they missed out on Dakota LeFew, that was that. That was it. So they had more faith in Jaquan Carlos being a starting point guard. I don't think Jaquan Carlos is a terrible player to come off the bench, but the reality is he might be the best point guard on the team, and that's just not good enough. That's misevaluating the talent. He was a 4-star transfer, but he's probably best coming off the bench, and I think he should be a starter because he might be the best option now. That's a problem. That's misevaluating talent. I think another example goes back to last season with Naheem McLeod. They were trying to get him to be the starting center. He's not a starting center, and they recognized that this offseason by getting Eddie Lampkin and the fact that he doesn't even play on this year's team. So sometimes this staff will misevaluate the talent that's available. As far as not developing talent, I think one of the best cases of that is Chris Bell. I think he is a talented player, but for one reason or another, he just hasn't taken that jump, and his efficiency has now gone down. It's actually trending back up. In the last few games, he's up to 32% three-point shooting. But you get the point. I thought that this year could be a really big year for him in year 3, and it just has not clicked. And he still has his deficiencies in other areas of the floor. He's still not a good rebounder, and he's still not a good defender. It's now year 3 in college. He could shoot sometimes, but he has not quite developed into the player that I think a lot of us think he can be. Elijah Moore, to be determined. He has not had the greatest true freshman season, but I don't think it's fair to say that he hasn't developed yet because he's only a true freshman. Next year, he could easily pop, and we'll say that he did develop. And then that leads me to number 3, which is I don't think at times this team is taking the correct talent that is available. Look at the front court. When they're all healthy, Eddie Lampkin, Donnie Freeman, Jair Davis. I think all of those players in their own right are pretty talented. And I think all of them have pretty much, maybe less so Donnie because he's only a true freshman, but for Jair Davis and Eddie Lampkin, they have maxed out their ability. They have developed. They are what they are, and I think they are pretty solid college basketball players. But I don't think it's the right mix. It's not the right mix when they're all healthy. None of them are good defenders. None of them. That's a problem. Also, are any of them really good shooters? Donnie Freeman is the best of those 3 at shooting, but none of them are that great at shooting the basketball. So they're talented players, and they've developed, but are they the right fit? Are they exactly what the team needs? Now, fortunately, as far as correcting the 3-pronged problem that I have presented, Syracuse Basketball, they hired a general manager over the summer named Alex Klein. He really didn't have any input on this year's roster because he wasn't there. But hopefully he'll come in and he'll help solve the problem this offseason. Hopefully he can identify the right talent. Hopefully they can develop the talent that they get. And hopefully they don't misevaluate. That's just how it goes. That's the issue with this season. Am I giving Adrian Autry a pass? Absolutely not. Because he was the one who constructed this year's roster. And quite frankly, I've been on the record before, and I'll say it again. I don't think he deserves a 3rd year. But that's the problem. They're misevaluating, they're not developing, and they're not taking the right talent. And as a result, you get a team that's full of 4- and 5-star players. That's 9-12 and 3-7 in a not very good conference. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. As far as what is coming up later today here on Locked On Syracuse, we got ACC Squad at 5 p.m. Eastern. All right, we're going to talk about a lot of Syracuse football and their schedule, as well as other schedules around the ACC. Thank you, everyone, for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs, they keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe, and I will see you all again soon.